That's doing that. Let's share some text. Get that in place. Bing, bada boom. There's the meeting. Up for live stream. Hello. Sorry there, the confusion in the app of what I was trying to do. And let's get that placed there. That adjusted. That resized. All the good stuff. All right. And it's still just, well, take a sip of tea and get ready to go. All right, to work. So we are in the second half of our discussion of Rambam's selections from Mishnah Torah, where he deals with the concept of the Messianic age and Biviyat HaMashiach, the coming of the Messiah, in particular in the section we're about to look at. So these chapters, 11 and 12, are a summary, as I talked about last week. This does not mean it is the final word. Very important, just explanatory note. Set this to one side if you'd like. If you've heard it before, just bear with me or skip ahead if you're watching this on a recording. So in Judaism, our canonization, our official establishment of text that is considered to be universally accepted and thus binding upon the Jewish people, finishes with the final editing, of what we call the Babylonian Talmud, or the Bavli. So after the Bavli's creation, which at this point is about 1,300 years ago, any additional writings, no matter who the author is, are considered to be application, exhortation, clarification of our shared foundation. This is why we end up with a variety. There may be differences of opinion on how best to interpret or apply that shared foundational work, the Talmud, as well as all of the elements which went into its creation, all the way back to Torah itself. And that's why in Ashkenaz or in Sfarad, they have different interpretations on some matters. Now, obviously, there is a great deal of agreement, a lot of unanimity. This is why even 500 years after Rambam, when the Shulchan Aruch is written, it only takes the Ramah, the Ashkenazic authority, to add a few notes to what we see from Joseph Caro, the original writer of the Shulchan Aruch, in order to add some clarifications or distinctions that happen between Ashkenazic and Sephardic practice. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones. If you read through that work in particular, you'll see numerous statements of Yesh Omrim. There are those who say, meaning that there are other opinions as well cited, some of which are rejected, but most of which are accepted as being a possible practice, even if it isn't the one that the particular author is putting forward as their favorite. Rambam doesn't speak in that same way. Rambam is very straightforward that what he is saying is what is true. And it is true for his interpretation, and certainly for his community, which accepted his authority. It is, of course, the way that they conducted themselves. But for the rest of the world, in his day as well as in ours, his words are one among many. It is often given a place of pride because it is so clearly written and such a comprehensive and well-established interpretation. But it does mean that there is still room for variety. That being said, as we get down to these chapters in particular, I think we would be well served by paying close attention to what he is and is not saying. Rambam is trying to bring together the many different ideas that we saw in the Talmud, as well as other verses from Tanakh and rabbinic literature, too extensive for us to cover in our class, but Rambam's encyclopedic mind could bring them together into a synthesis. And in the process of doing so, he is very much both establishing what is mainstream as well as echoing what is mainstream. There is some discussion around the edges, and we'll talk about that as we go through some of the points, but it is a great basic position. And if you ever are interested in discussing some of the points of discussion beyond what we will do today, as always, look me up and we can talk in person, over email, whatever works well. All right, without further ado, let's get to Rambam himself. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change or there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. But this is a topic that we saw come up in the Bavli itself, with the idea that the world would be unchanged except for Judaism's freedom from subjugation. And Rambam is clarifying that from his point of view, and he'll give some proof in just a moment, this is an opposition to the idea that the world itself, this world, Olam Hazeh, will be fundamentally reworked, that the basic rules of creation are going to continue. Gravity is going to do gravity stuff. Laws of thermodynamics are going to do the laws of thermodynamics stuff. That all of that is going to happen. We shouldn't expect miracles that are beyond the embedded state of this world to be prevalent in that time any more than we would in this time. So how then are we going to deal with the fact that there are many passages in the prophetic literature in particular that seem to indicate that there will be, well, radical changes? And let's go ahead and take a look here. Although Isaiah 11:6 states, "The wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat," these words are a metaphor and a parable. As a little aside, it is always fun to watch people wrestle with this verse the first time they see it in reality, because it doesn't say the lion and the lamb. That is a paraphrased and mangled English idiom, because we like alliteration in English, which is why we get other such things as "the proof is in the pudding," when the original phrase was "the proof of the pudding is in the eating." So we are known for taking verses or aphorisms and proverbs, both colloquial as well as biblical, and retooling them to make them more phonetically, literarily comfortable or pleasing to an English ear. But the original text does not say the lion and the lamb. The original text says wolf and the lamb, and leopard and kid, meaning the young goat, etc., etc. So back to the actual explanation. How do we handle the fact that Isaiah says the wolf will dwell with the lamb? That seems like it's saying that wolves will no longer eat sheep, that there must therefore be a change in the working of creation. If the animal biology and ecology have changed to the point that wolves don't hunt lambs, then that sounds like a miracle and a changing of the nature of the world. But Rambam is arguing that is a metaphor and a parable. The interpretation of the prophecy is as follows, meaning, why does Isaiah say this? What does he actually mean with it if he's not talking about a reordering of the food chain? Israel will dwell securely, together with the wicked Gentiles, who are likened to a wolf and a leopard, as in the prophecy of Jeremiah, chapter 5. A wolf from the wilderness shall spoil them, and a leopard will stalk their cities. That is to say, they will all return to the truth faith and no longer steal or destroy. Rather, they will eat permitted food at peace with Israel, as Isaiah states, this time from the following verse, "The lion will eat straw like an ox." It's not talking about feeding lions the wrong kind of food. It's talking about the change that will come over the national identities and the national status. Animals can't change how they behave all that much. Humans, on the other hand, absolutely can. And that is what we're looking for in the Messianic age, a return in our spirit towards the proper path, not just on an individual level, but even on national and global terms, so that those who are weak, meaning militarily lack the power or economically lack power, will not be preyed upon by the strong, by the wolf, who has more military, economic, or other power. And that is a rather basic precondition for having a good and just society. And of course, a sharp reminder to those who believe that might makes right is in fact the opposite of a godly way. Similarly, Other messianic prophecies of this nature are metaphor. In the messianic era, everyone will realize which matters were implied by these metaphors and which allusions they contained. What he is trying to say here is he's not going to go through and explain every single metaphor, as he'll explain in a little bit more detail why not. But instead, when it occurs, we will all go, oh, that's what they meant by wolf dwelling with the lamb. Some of them are pretty obvious to us now. Others may be a little bit more opaque, and we will only understand them in hindsight. And again, as we talked about directly in the Bavli, our sages taught there will be no difference between the current age and the Messianic era, except the emancipation from our subjugation to the Gentile kingdoms. All right. So having set aside the notion that we're going to be living in an age of wonders and miracles that would make Hollywood blush, but instead living in a world where the true miracle of justice, peace, and goodness is going to be our reward, we're now going to talk about some of the teething pains that will go into that, in particular, a war. The simple interpretation of the prophet's words appear to imply that the war of Gog and Magog will take place at the beginning of the Messianic age. Before the war of Gog and Magog, a prophet will arise to inspire Israel to be upright and prepare their hearts. As Malachi chapter 3 states, behold, I am sending you Elijah. So you'll notice that Rambam is being slightly hedging his bets here, which is unusual for him. But he is pointing out that it appears to imply, because he knows that the texts within the prophets, as well as within rabbinic interpretation, is less than 100% transparent, less than 100% clear and self-revelatory of what the precise timeline will be. But what he can put together is that there is going to be the war, yes, and that before the war happens, there is going to be some restoration within the people, and this will be exemplified with this idea of Elijah's coming. But what that prophet's return means is the subject of his discussion on the next couple paragraphs. He, meaning the prophet that comes, will not come to declare the pure impure or to declare the impure pure. That is to say, his job is not going to be to show up and make halakhic matters regarding things such as ritual purity. He will not dispute the lineage of those presumed to be a proper pedigree, nor will he validate the pedigree of those whose lineage is presumed blemish. This was an issue in the past, and it continues to be an argument in modern-day Jewish communities, well, between communities more, where there are those that are said to be Jewish and other people reject them, and those who have been rejected that others say are fine, or people who are said to come from a lineage of mamzerim, people who were born from illicit relationships, or people who are being treated that way, even though in fact they were not born from that type of lineage. And he is arguing that this prophet is not coming to establish yea or nay on those types of issues. So what is this prophet coming to do? Rather, he will establish peace within the world. As Malachi points out, continuing, he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. That this is about reconciliation and peace within the world. It is not about putting a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We're going to come back to those thumbs up and thumbs down in a minute, but for the moment, that is this is the clarification that Rambam is giving us for this first step towards messianic redemption. There are some sages. Notice again, he is putting out there clearly, unusual for him that there is quite a variety on this topic, but this is the way he is presenting it. There are some sages who say that Elijah's coming will precede the coming of the Mashiach. So how much earlier would Elijah come? Exactly, will he have to come before, during, alongside of? There are different opinions. Now, the fact that he quotes the idea that there are those that say Elijah will precede is reflecting the fact that this is the most common interpretation of rabbinic and biblical writings, that Elijah is going to be slightly ahead of the Messiah himself. This is one of the reasons why we look for Elijah at every Havdalah, because we are hoping that he will come as the symbol of the imminent arrival of Mashiach. But even having made somewhat of a statement of what he believes is the most likely correct interpretation, Rambam continues to explain rather emphatically, all these and similar matters cannot be definitely known by man until they occur, for these matters are undefined in the prophet's words, and even the wise men have no established tradition regarding these matters except their own interpretation of the verses. Therefore, there is a controversy among them regarding these matters. Rambam is being very transparent and very emphatic, I will say again in my own emphatic way, that we cannot say with 100% certainty exactly what the timeline will look like and what all of the details of the pre-Messianic period, the arrival of the Messiah, and the days of the Messiah and the post-Messianic era. We cannot say with any confidence exactly what it will be. We have interpretations. Numerous authors have given their interpretation. Some of them we saw in the Talmud, some are in other Jewish literature, but no one can claim they have the undisputed truth. They can claim they have the truth, and indeed many people do, many of them on YouTube to this day, trying to make money off that idea, or at the very least raise controversy and anger, because that makes them money in other ways. But the claim that there is only one way to interpret this is patently false. Rambam is being very clear here that this debate is perfectly normal because there is not a received tradition. There is not a chain from Moshe or even from the prophets themselves that say this is exactly what these verses mean, and this is exactly what the calendar will look like in terms of event 1, event 2, event 3, and so forth. Since we do not have that tradition, we are able to interpret to a point, and we are able to discuss and even debate what we think best matches the verses and rabbinic traditions that we do have. But we cannot sit back and say, no, I have been inspired. I know what it is. The rest of you are all wrong. Trust me. That's not the way this topic works in Judaism. However, he does continue with something that we need to hold on to very, very tightly. Regardless of the debate concerning these questions, neither the order of the occurrence of these events or their precise details are among the fundamental principles of the faith. So, a person should not occupy himself with the Agadot and homiletics concerning these and similar matters, nor should he consider them as essentials. Study of them will neither bring fear or love of God. All right, incredibly important phrase here. One that you might actually argue undercuts the entire point of this this class series. And I'll come back to why we're doing the class despite what Rambam is arguing here, of which I agree with him. What he is trying to say here is that the precise truth claims the Messiah will come 30 days after Elijah. The Messiah will wreak vengeance upon Gog on this month or something like that. Despite the fact that people will make claims like that, despite that some of those statements will end up being true. The Messiah will arrive on some day, and he will do some deeds. The precision, the precise nature of those deeds and those times are not actually things that Judaism calls upon us to have a firm statement of faith and belief about, let alone practice. Compare that to, for example, the idea of there being only one God, monotheism. That we are called upon explicitly and very, very clearly to believe, to take into our heart, to make as part of our understanding of not just what Judaism says, but what our own heart should be saying and how we understand the world around us. And if somebody is rejecting that principle, Judaism would rightly say that they are rejecting a core principle, that they are destroying a pillar of Jewish thinking and Jewish belief. If somebody says the Messiah will come before Elijah or that Elijah will come after the Messiah, they are not committing the same kind of crime. They are not causing the same trouble within themselves, their spirit, and the world. They are allowed to think a great many different things about this time, and they are allowed to not think about these times. And in fact, that's what Rambam seems to be recommending. We'll come back to how much you should think about it in just another paragraph or two. But for the moment, he's basically saying, don't worry about it. Right? This is not something that you need to refine your thought and understanding on. This is something that can be just essentially ignored as a part of Jewish thought. So why are we doing this class if this can be ignored? Why are we doing this class if the study of this topic is not going to bring fear or love of God, the two reins to help control our behavior and life in this world, which is the primary focus, as we've been discussing since day one of this class? Well, because honestly, in this day and age, I have to disagree with Rambam. I don't do it a lot, but I will absolutely argue that in 2026, the amount of misinformation and claims, both from within and from outside the Jewish community, regarding Messianic days and Messianic predictions and the implication of those ideas on people's deliberate choices and how they live and how they govern their communities is fundamentally different than it was 1,000 years ago when Rambam was writing. Therefore, we kind of have to at least fill in enough of the detail that we can be properly prepared to answer those who make claims about these topics, or worse, make policy demands based upon their claims about these topics. Demands about how we should live, about how a country should behave, or anything in between. And so we do need to know this. And this will allow us to better structure our communities as well as our individual lives so that we can fear and love God more clearly and more properly rather than being guided by all of the chatter on this topic. All right, so what should we then believe? What should we then focus on? Well, Rambam explains. Similarly, one should not try to determine the appointed time for Mashiach's coming. Instead, our sages declared, may the spirits of those who attempted to determine the time of Mashiach's coming expire, which we covered in slightly different translation in our survey of the Bavli. Rather, here is the main point. One should await and believe in the general conception of the matter as explained. We wait for the coming of the Mashiach. We wait with hope and anticipation that the Messiah will come, that the world will be redeemed, and that the general outline that we have been looking at all these many weeks is what will be the reality of that time. The details, I'm really waiting for my bejeweled walls of Jerusalem. I'm really waiting to see that wolf and lamb sitting down to. No, those are not where we hang our expectations. That is not where we focus our passion and devotion. We focus on the idea that this world was created so that it would eventually reach a state of redemption, that this is built into the fabric of creation and is not a maybe, but is a definite. And we wait for that to occur. And we do everything we can to live our life as properly within this world in the meantime, as we've talked about off and on throughout these many weeks. And we believe in general that that time of redemption, that time of the coming of the Messiah, will lead to justice and peace and goodness for everyone, everywhere in the world. That's it. That is the general principle that we hold on to. And the details are interesting to study for some, but they are not required. And they are definitely something that we should be skeptical of for anyone who overemphasizes those points. All right, but let's go ahead and take a look at one of the other sections that was heavily criticized and excised from the copies of Rambam's works by the censors of foreign nations. During the era of the Messianic king, once his kingdom has been established and all of Israel has gathered around him, the entire nation's line of descent will be established on the basis of his words and the prophetic spirit which rests upon him. As Malachi says, he shall sit as a refiner and purifier. Okay, now we said before that the prophet Elijah would not be doing any sort of checking on these types of things, but instead would be helping to create peace as part of the messianic arrival. Now, after the kingship has been established, the kingdom is secure, and everything is working the way it should, now there will be, well, something akin to what Malachi mentioned of refining and purification. But what does that mean? Rambam is going to clarify this, and we'll talk about why he's doing so much more emphasis on this than what others might think as more interesting topics in just a second. He will purify the lineage of the Levites first, stating, he is a priest of defined lineage, he is a Levite of defined lineage. Those whose lineage he will not be recognized will be lowered to the status of Israelites. This is implied by Ezra. The governor said to them, they should not eat of the most holy things until a priest arises who will wear the Urim and Tumim, or Vitumim if we want to have the proper pronunciation. So from this verse, you can infer that the prophetic spirit will be used to define and notify the pedigree of lineage. It is important, if we are reestablishing the temple with the temple sacrifices, that the Levites and as a subgroup, the Kohanim, the priests, will be of confirmed lineage, because it would be inappropriate, indeed a sin, for somebody who was not actually a Levite or not actually a Kohen to partake in the service or to eat from the things that have been set aside, only to be eaten by the Kohanim, or from some of the tithes by the Levites. So this does need to be clarified. By the way, this is why the restorationists who talk about rebuilding the temple right now in advance of the Mashiach, whom well, we'll get to it later, but the vast majority of Jews do not believe is currently around, are a little bit putting the cart before the horse, because without this step, even if we actually had the temple in Jerusalem, even if we actually had the altar and the red heifer to make sure that the purification took place and all of those other conditions were actually being met, who would be allowed to serve at the altar? It is not clear. Now, I know you can argue, but we have people whose last name is Cohen, and they are called up to the Torah as a Kohen, and indeed they are, and they should continue to be so. However, that attestation is not significant enough. It is not sure enough for planting someone before the altar in Jerusalem. That would require prophetic inspiration. Now, probably also wondering, at least if you're at all involved in the Jewish world, but what about the DNA test? Isn't there a DNA test which shows a shared genetic marker for the Kohanim? And the answer to that is, yes, there is a DNA test that, yes, seems to show that a vast number of the people who have a Kohanic tradition within their family do indeed share that same genetic marker. However, Judaism does not determine lineage by genetics. We do not determine lineage by blood. Judaism established very, very long ago that was not a means, not just that it was unavailable, but that even were it available, it should not be used as the yardstick by which we measure one's Jewishness or status within the Kohanic world. So if someone showed up to me and said, look, Rabbi, I've got the test, and the test says I've got the gene that means I'm, similar to the Kohanim, I would have to tell them, that's great. Does your family know that they are Kohen? And if they say, well, no one in my family knew this, but look at the gene, look what the technology told me, I would have to say that's amazing. But no, you're not considered a Kohen until Mashiach comes up and confirms that, because we don't use genetics to do that. There's many more issues with the genetic testing. The fact is that somebody could have those same types of markers and not be a Kohen. It is simply that those who do have a Kohanic remembrance in their family are more often than not marked by that, but it doesn't mean that that genetic marker couldn't exist in somebody who isn't a Kohen. So it is not so easy to simply say, if I've got the marker, I must be a Kohen. And by the way, that is exactly the same thing when somebody has a genetic marker that in many of the tests will say Ashkenazic or Sephardic. It means that the markers you have are shared by the vast majority of people who have a known tradition that their family is Ashkenazic or Sephardic. But that doesn't mean that those are the only people on Earth who have that particular genetic combination. Uh, Humans are not as diverse as we like to think, and it is very easy for people that are not Jewish or not Kohanes to have the same or nearly the same genetic markers, which would obviously confound that expectation. We could do a whole nother discussion about genetics and its lack of standing within Judaism, but that's not the point today. Instead, we want to turn to what happens when we define the lineage of Israelites, that is to say, the rest of us. When he defines the lineage of the Israelites, he will make known their tribal lineage alone, stating he is from this tribe and he is from another tribe, meaning he'll point to one and say, oh, he is from the tribe of Naphtali, he is from the tribe of Judah, etc., etc. This is something that the vast majority of people have no way of knowing. They might have a tradition, but certainly no way of knowing for sure of which tribe their family originally was descended from. The one exception to that are people who routinely claim that they are from the lineage of David, because David came from Judah. Therefore, people are able to claim then they're from the tribe of Judah, but that's usually they're focused on the fact that they're from David. But this is what the Messiah will do, is simply reallocate people to their tribal original inheritance, which would be father to son, father to son, father to son, all the way down to the present day. He will not, by contrast, state concerning a person who is presumed of unblemished lineage, he is illegitimate, or he is of slave lineage. For the law is, once a family has become intermingled with the entire Jewish people, they may remain intermingled. This was a major topic in Rambam's time. It was a major time in the rabbinic time prior to Rambam, which is where he came up with this idea. And of course, it is still a major problem because people like to gossip and be terrible to one another. So if somebody is in the community and people say that they are perfectly fine, but it turns out that 8 generations ago, 10, 12, 13 generations ago, somebody was a mamzer. They were the product of an adulterous relationship, for example, and then the mother took the child, fled to another country, and just made up a story and said, oh yes, our family was destroyed by one of the many catastrophes that has befallen our people, and my husband was killed, and now my child and I we come and we seek to grow here in this community. Once they've been accepted, once they've been intermingled, we're now 13 generations later. We do not need to undo what happened 13 generations ago, nor would we undo all of the descendants of each generation that came from that intermingling. This is an incredibly important proposition within Jewish thought, and one that, as the Jewish world continues to see more and more fracture lines in the modern world, we need to take more seriously. That if we are together, we stay together. And yes, we can put in a modicum of examination if there is a particular reason for doubt when somebody is making a claim about their lineage or their status that seems especially troubling. But the fact is, once it has been established, we never go back and re-examine that. They are established, they are part of the people, we're done. And even Mashiach himself, even with the power of prophetic insight, would not use such prophetic insight to untangle it. So again, this is not just that we lack the capability. This isn't because we don't have enough technology or we don't have the right prophetic gift. Even when we have that, under Mashiach, that will not be how it will be used. And for people who really wish that they could know and be sure and have all of this kind of gossipy things laid out in front of everyone, you know what? Sit down and think about yourself for a little bit, and also sit down and think for a little bit that you probably do not have a family tree that goes back all the way to biblical times. If you lack a family tree of 30 generations that explains everybody's perfect origin and practice, you don't know what's in there either. And you don't know what has been intermingled. And remember, even if you have the direct line of your family, you have everybody that contributed to the people that contributed to your family. It is a simply impossible undertaking, and one that should not be undertook. So, very important statement about Jewish unity here, and we will move on. The sages and the prophets did not yearn for the Messianic era in order to have dominion over the world, to rule over the Gentiles, to be exalted by the nations, or to eat, drink, and celebrate. All right. I'm sorry, anti-Semites. When we talk about the Messiah, it is not because we want to be in charge. And I'm also sorry we're not in charge right now either, despite what your conspiracy theories say. We are not looking forward to the Messianic eras because it will give us more power, or because other people will have to bow down to us, or for the more venal ideas that we're going to be able to sit and live in luxury. That is not why we look forward to the Messianic era. Rather, they, meaning the sages and the prophets, desired to be free, to involve themselves in Torah and wisdom without any pressures or disturbances, so that they would merit the world to come, as explained in Hilchot Tshuva. Hilchot Tshuva is an earlier section of Rambam's work, and especially now that we are in the month of Elul, highly recommend. You can find a great English translation if you don't speak Hebrew on Sefaria, and it is a wonderful set of chapters to read through, to remind yourself about repentance and how we change and how we become the best version of ourselves that we possibly can be. And that's the point, right? The Messianic redemption is not there so that we get to be in charge and do to them what they did to us. It is not so that we get to run the world. And it isn't that we just get to sit back and drink ourselves silly. It is so that all of the things that currently distract or prevent or oppress our ability to involve ourselves with God and Torah and wisdom will be gone. They'll be swept away. All of the things that currently clutter our mind with stress, or our lives with obstacles, or trivial concerns that are of man-made artificial distraction, will simply be no more, and thus we will be freed to pursue the true human endeavor, which is to understand God. And as Jews, that means through Torah and the wisdom of our people, and to do so in a way that is undisturbed. And that means that we will be able to rise in our spiritual life here, and rise in our spiritual life in Olam Haba, in the world to come, after we have left this physical existence. In that era, meaning during the time of the Messianic times, there will be neither famine or war, envy or competition, for good will flow in abundance, and all the delights will be freely available as dust. The occupation of the entire world will be solely to know God. Now, you may have remembered that we said earlier there wouldn't be any miracles, and you may be questioning, no famine, no war, no envy, no competition. Aren't those miracles? No, because these are not supernatural occurrences. The absence of famine just means we're doing a good job as stewards of the world and as neighbors to one another, so that the great bounty that this world can and does produce will be shared in a way so that none will go hungry. Likewise, war is not a biological necessity for humans, despite what some idiots think. War is not an inevitability the same way gravity is. And so its cessation is not a cessation of the laws of nature. It is a cessation of our error. It is a cessation of our mistakes. And envy, competition, these are all things that are in our control right now, that we can, at least individually, fight against and reduce in ourselves and within our communities. But in the time of the Messianic period, will be universally done away with, because we will know God more clearly. We will be properly attached to God in a way that all of the things that allowed these problems to persist will no longer make sense, and they'll no longer thus exist, because all of the problems that are truly preventing us from living our life as we should are made by us. Either us in tiny increments individually, or us collectively with communities, or us nationally or internationally as a large group of people who continue to collectively go down the wrong road. But that is not inevitable. That is not indeed even why we are here. And this is the part of the Messianic vision that gives me the greatest joy and the greatest hope and support and strength right here and right now. Whether the Messiah comes 1,000 years from now or comes tomorrow, please God, I know that this world doesn't have to be this way, that humanity is not destined to suffer, that instead it is in our control. And whether the Messiah comes 1,000 years or tomorrow, we can do something to make tomorrow better. We can do something to make today better. I can make my next hour better. That is in my power to contribute towards, just like it's in my power to contribute towards its negation. Therefore, Rambam continues, the Jews will be great sages and know the hidden matters, grasping the knowledge of their Creator according to the full extent of human potential. As Isaiah chapter 11 states, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. The entire world will be filled with this knowledge. It will suffuse us, reach every part of our spirit and every part of our existence. And that is something that is worth hoping for, and it is something worth working for in whatever piecemeal way we can in the meantime. With that, I will bid you a farewell for today. Next week, we're going to deal with the rubber hitting the road. That is to say, the various attempts by different people to wear the mantle of Mashiach, of Messiah, within the Jewish people. We're going to start with Bar Kokhba, which is perhaps the most famous of the, quote, failed or false messiahs. We'll talk a lot about that term or the terminology next week, but we will cover a number of them throughout the rest of this course. So please stay tuned, because as much as we hope for this, the reality so far has not been so great. And spoiler alert, they were not actual messiahs because the job isn't done. Remember, rule number one, to be considered the Messiah, you have to actually have done the job. If you didn't do the job and you died, well, then I guess you weren't the Messiah. And we'll have to come up with some other way to describe what you did and the impact you made, but it is not going to be Mashiach. With that, take care and be well.